so love you deeply. So thank you for inviting me to this conversation. And Sonya Renee Taylor, I've had a secret crush with you since I met you a couple of years ago. So it's a little girl crush, but thank you for being in my universe. Thank you. I'm so like surprised I said that because I would never have said that before the pandemic. So thank you.
I love it.
So let me just do a brief introduction of Sonya. Um, Sonya Renee Taylor is the founder and radical executive officer of The Body Is Not an Apology, a digital media and education company promoting radical self-love and body empowerment as the foundational tool for social justice and global transformation. Sonia's work as a highly sought after award winning performance poet, activist, and transformational leader. She continues to have global reach. Sonia is a former national and international poetry slam champion, author of 2 books, including The Body Is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love, um, and educator and thought leader who has enlightened and inspired organizations, audiences, and individuals from boardrooms to prisons to universities to homeless shelters, elementary schools, and just you're connected all over the world. So thank you for actually saying yes to this conversation. And this conversation for us came as um, some may know a quote that was actually erroneously um, um, given to Brene Brown, but that got all cleared up. And so the quote was, "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature." And with this, Sonya, I would just love to begin to kind of like listen to just your thoughts around what does that not going back to normal look like? And you know, as I was kind of thinking before today, like there's some normal things that I want to go back to. So why don't you begin and we could keep, you know, share each other's thoughts.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I realize that I think there's one feedback, so if we're not talking, we should just be on mute because I think that'll
Yeah.
help folks with the feedback. I first want to just say thank you all um, uh, so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation today. And thanks everyone who's here. I've seen names pop up of people that I know from all over the world. We've got, I saw India, I've seen all kinds of folks from Aotearoa, from Oakland to Aotearoa is kind of how, how that feels to me. And I'm just so deeply, deeply grateful to be in this conversation with you all today. And I guess at the first, I want to start by saying, because it feels really this moment where all of a sudden, you know, it's a weird thing when a quote goes viral and then all of a sudden people are saying your thoughts, and which is cool, but it also sort of sets up this dynamic where you become an expert at something. And I'm like, I'm an expert at trying to figure it out, like the rest of us, right? Like that's, we are experts at trying to figure it out. And I very much just feel like a soul awakening in this particular time, just as we all are, or we certainly all are being given the opportunity to be in this particular moment. And so I ain't an expert. I'm just, you know, I'm just a girl trying to figure it out. And that feels really important to say. I want to start by just giving us a chance to take a breath together, because that feels important to me in terms of connecting us. So if everyone will just take a deep breath in and then exhale. And then take another deep breath in. And then exhale. And it feels so important to me that we do that, because that breath is how I'm reminded of our connectedness, right? That it is that shared experience of breathing that ties all of us together, that tethers us to this physical plane, this realm that we live in, but that it also is this matter of the breath, this way that breath happens. And in this particular moment in history, the particulates of that breath that demand that we have all this distance between us in order to stay well. And that there's some lesson in that. I really believe that's important. There's something to reflect about how harm and connection are the same source, right? That harm and connection are both of us. And that the binary between good and bad and us and them is all just an illusion, a thing that we made up. Because it's really complex and uncomfortable to have to grapple with the full magnitude of our beings, right? And all the good and all the icky. But that what I think that leaves us to really be with, to be present with, is that we hold the whole of existence inside of us, that all of it is inside of us, both the curse and the cure. And we've never been one or the other. We've always been all of the above. And that feels important to me. And, you know, just like you said, Bethsaida, like, there's stuff about normal that I miss. I miss brunch. I miss brunch. I miss fancy cocktails. I miss dressing up in a cute summer dress and going outside. I miss paying too much money for brioche French toast. I miss complaining with my friends about the fact that the brioche French toast was $22. I miss it. You know, because it was part of something that felt familiar and felt joyful and felt connected and felt, you know, light and effervescent and people watching on a corner and the busy sounds of, you know, sort of nosying and eavesdropping on the conversations of the people 2 tables over. And I loved all of that stuff and I miss it. And so there's a part of me that wants to go back to normal too. But I just realized that, like, normal, that there has always been a cost for that normal. And that's the thing that I think we forget, is that normal wasn't free. It's just the cost we often obscured. It was hidden. And it was hidden because it's convenient that way, because that's what keeps us from actually having to interrogate what normal really is and who is paying the price for us to have normal. And so somebody asked in the chat, so what happened was, I do these videos on Instagram, and if you don't follow me on Instagram, I invite you every once and again. I wake up and something's happening in my brain, and I turn on my video and I do what I call a "What's up, y'all?" where I just start off, "What's up, y'all?" and then I share whatever it is that's kind of percolating for me at that moment. And I shared a "What's up, y'all" video about this idea of normal, because I kept hearing folks talking about wanting to go back to normal, and I too was having that experience, but I was also having the dissonance of that experience where I was like, normal's how we got here. Normal is why we sitting in our houses separated right now, because our normal was actually really harmful. Our normal was really, really dangerous. And so I put up, and that, yes, Susan, our normal was an illusion. Our normal was completely an illusion. And so I did this video, and the quote that Cider read, I'm going to read the rest of it because the meme part got cut off. And so the quote said, "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was," right? That's the illusion part. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed and inequity, exhaustion, depletion, distraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. What we've been forced to leave behind, we needed to leave behind. What is getting us through is what we will need to take us forward. All the rest is up to us. So dream. While we have so much time, dream of the life you want. Dream of the world you desire to exist in. Look for the places in your dreams that have parts of the old world that were not serving us, and remove them. And what does the dream become then? And from there, we can add to the collective weaving of whatever is supposed to be next. So if we're going to heal, let it be glorious. And that was the full quote. And somehow, because we, because the strange confluence of the internet and racism and a lot of other things happened, the quote got attributed to Brene Brown, because I guess somebody was like, if someone said something moving, it must be a really popular white woman. And then they went so far as to take her face, and they took the whole quote and they put it on her face, and then they sent it around the whole world. But I really appreciate Brene Brown for just being really gracious. And yes, I'll need to send the full chat because I don't have access to the full quote right now, but I will send it along so that it'll be in the notes afterwards that go out to folks. So Brene Brown's team, Brene was like, I didn't say that. And so her team put out a notice, put on her social media platforms to millions of people, like, I didn't say that, Sonya said that, and we should attribute it correctly. And I really appreciate it. And of course, it made that particular quote very busy again. Yes, hashtag cite Black women. And so what I got left with in this moment, and I just saw someone say that they said it and that they had the quote in their wedding vows last month. And I'm like, that's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Congratulations. So I say all of that to say that when I allowed myself to really think about what going back to normal meant, I could see that it was normal, quote unquote, that got us where we are. The normal was in so many ways the source of our separation. The normal is what put thousands of us on planes every single day, leaving giant carbon footprints with each cross-country and cross-continental jaunt that we flew, while also carrying a small novel virus around the whole world within a matter of weeks, leading to us all being isolated in a global pandemic, right? Normal was squabbling over whether or not we should offer a $15 minimum wage to the people that we would come to call essential when all of life was forced to shut down, right? Normal was systemic racism, the kind that saw the most disproportionate impacts of COVID-related deaths happening to Black and brown people. And then once everybody realized that's what was happening, we were then like, oh, it's fine to open the gyms and the nail salons again, because the people that are dying are the people that we didn't care about dying to begin with. Normal was thinking that we were separate until we were all actually forced to be separate, and then desperately missing each other, right? And so when I really let myself lean into what was normal, I was like, I don't want to go back to that. I'm not longing for that. And if I have to give up some brioche French toast, it'll be okay. And that's all right. And I think that is actually a really important thing to remember, because part of what I believe keeps us really stuck in these patterns where we keep reaffirming these really horrible systems is that we forget, in order to transform them, we're going to have to give up some stuff. And we are a species, particularly in the US, but in most westernized nations around the world, and that includes all the places that colonialism has touched. Part of colonialism and the import of colonialism is the import of capitalism, which means that we really like stuff. We have become very intimate with stuff, and so part of what keeps the systems in place is that we shut down at the idea of having to give up some stuff. And that keeps this system moving just fine. And so, when I started talking about this, like, how do we not go back to normal? What I started thinking about, and I talked about weaving and stitching, and that was the analogy that was kind of operating in that original quote, but it wasn't actually what I was feeling. What I was feeling like is we are in the fire. we are in the collective fire. And that collective fire feels uncomfortable. And so I started thinking about, what does it mean to be in the collective fire, and what becomes possible inside of a fire. And so this talk started being about forging forward, right? Because forging is what happens inside the fire. And so this process, to me, of not going back to normal is about creating a new normal birthed in this time of fire. And it is both a literal time of great fires, right? The kind that intentionally set the Amazon ablaze for profit, the kind that of our reckless behaviors level towns called paradise, right? Pushing species out of their natural habitats and into closer cohabitation with humans, like bats near pigs that go to slaughter and then become meals, and new viruses that set fire inside of our bodies. Forging is also what happens in the crucible of the unknown. The fire of not knowing whether or not this job market will ever rebound enough for us to make the money that we need to pay back our debt. It's the fire of not knowing whether we'll get to go back to work, and if we will, if our job will be the same, if it will still be enough to sustain us, or if we'll open up all of these things only to have a viral resurgence and find ourselves confined and restricted again in just a matter of months. All around us are the wafts, wafting the flames of uncertainty, right? Fueled by fears about whether or not this virus will ultimately be a fatal blow to ourselves, our society, our immune compromised friends and families. There's so much that we are being in the fire with right now. But I think one of the biggest questions that's in this fire right now is, how do we source a new definition of ourselves in this moment that is not made of the material of the old, right? So how do we source a definition of ourselves outside of the old meanings of worth and value that were created under the narrative of productivity, all crafted in a kiln of capitalism, right? The questions of whether or not I'm good enough if I didn't, if I'm not productive with this time, right? If I didn't start a business or write a book or record an album or start a garden or bake sourdough bread or participate in the Don't Rush Savage TikTok dance challenge, right? Who am I if I'm not working harder? If I'm not doing something productive with this time, right? And what do we call productive? And how have we allowed the word productive to only be in service to capitalism? Because healing is productive. Because rest when we're exhausted is productive. Because the time that we are spending caring for one another in this crisis is productive. But we've been told that that's not what we should code as productivity. And so many of us are in service to a definition of productivity that keeps us from actually honoring the lived trauma of this moment and what we as humans do to survive in trauma. The other piece about it that I think is fascinating, right, is that, and I think it's part of the reason why it certainly lives in the ingredients of the reasons why we see, people on state capitol buildings with guns, fighting for the right to go get sick. Literally, like fighting for the right to go get sick, which is that outside of a definition defined by our service toward capitalism, we cease to understand who we are. And so when you get sent home to sit alone, faced with who am I outside of this, that gets real uncomfortable. It gets real scary to have to ask, who am I outside of this? And so people are like, I'm not asking that question to myself. I'm going back to work. I'm going back to the normal where I was defined by that 9 to 5, where I was defined by my access to power and privilege, where I was defined by my hierarchy above other bodies. I want that world back because that is how I know myself, right? And so we're in this moment where we are getting an opportunity to deconstruct that. And I think that we're sitting in this opportunity of in the fire of inquiry, right? Who am I if I am not what we're leaving behind, right? The other, I feel like I missed something here. The other, I like to talk about definitions sometimes. And so there's the definition of forging, right, is to be heated up or hammered or beaten down, right? This is beaten down in fire, right? And I was like, oh, well, if that doesn't feel accurate to me, I don't know what is. And so perhaps you all are feeling hammered down in this, almost farcical reality that we seem to be in. 2 days before, and I've shared this a few times now, the 2 days before the New Zealand lockdown began, and ours is a complete and total shutdown of somebody keeps trying to call me. A complete shutdown of businesses and home, like lockdown at home. And 2 days before we went to that, which is level 4, and yes, I am in New Zealand. I'm in Brookby, New Zealand. 2 days before level 4, my furry life companion, Anastasia Duchess, who's been with me since she was 8 weeks old and could fit in the palm of my hand, got diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. And then the day before the level 4 complete lockdown and isolation in New Zealand, my relationship with my cohabitating partner ended abruptly. And then 12 days after that, my dog died. And so then I was in this house, and I live in a sprawling estate. It's gorgeous, where we were planning on having healing retreats, radical self-love healing retreats. And of course, those got canceled. So right as COVID hit, I was alone in this very large and expansive home without my dog and without my partner. And, I like to say I was like a walking country song. Like looking out the window through the pane. It was a rough time. And I'm hard-headed, and that's really what I think is what's going on. Is like the universe was like, Sonya's gonna need a little bit more than just a global pandemic to truly sit herself down and reflect on how she defines value. Because the truth was, when I'm honest with myself, so much of how I defined my own value, my who am I, was wrapped up in so many externalized things. It was wrapped up in my partner. It was wrapped up in this creation of home. It was wrapped up in being a lady with a fancy dog and a nice leather bag. It was wrapped up in healing retreats and all of these things. And who do I become if I am none of those things anymore? And in the 8 weeks of this isolation, in this very big home in this faraway land, I was forced to reckon with the profundity of grief and solitude in a way that I've never been forced to reckon with it. And my house is called Blackwood Manor. It's literally the silver sign on the front of the door. It was part of what it was that I loved about it when we first saw it. I was like, oh my gosh, it's a manor. It's so cute. A little sign, Blackwood Manor. And we'd only moved in 5 months earlier. We moved in October. And I feel like, not only was it the name of my home, but what's interesting is that it is also what is left after the fire. That's what Blackwood is, right? It's what's left after the fire. It is the ash from whence the phoenix can rise, right? The phoenix can only rise, again, if it's willing to be in the fire of inquiry. What in me has been strong enough to withstand this fire? What am I grateful to have seen burned away? And after the flames are extinguished, what will be the most precious for having survived? Those are the questions that I've been sitting with in this time of great fire. And I think that if we're going to forge a new normal, it's going to have to be shaped, hammered, beaten out of the answers to those questions. Mm-hmm. The other piece of this moment, there's a second definition to the word forge, and it is to make, especially by concentrated effort. And I think that that is the piece about how we move forward, is this concentrated effort. It's that, you know, what are we going to need if we are truly going to stitch a new garment, the one that fits all of humanity and all of nature? And so in order to do that, we are going to have to direct our concentrated efforts toward co-creation, collective effort. Exactly. That what we build alone simply will not ever be able to withstand the heat of this moment. It just can't. I didn't survive this last 8 weeks in isolation, isolated. I wasn't isolated. I felt isolated, and we were physically isolated. We are physically isolated, but we have not gotten through this moment alone, right? There are people who have handed us tissues. There are people, you know, passed through bars or sat on your stoop. Then they ran back to the car. People who called us when we were sick. It is the alchemy of our care for each other that makes co-creation possible. And alone our gifts, no matter how big, brilliant, magnanimous they are simply not made strong enough to will us to the other side of this crisis. But together, each of us gets to bring an offering, a precious ingredient to add to the elixir of survival that can actually sustain us. And in order to create this new normal, we've got to think beyond our individual experience and consider the collective. And again, like I said earlier, it's the lack of that consideration of the collective that's the reason why we look so raggedy right now. It's the reason why we are in this raggedy mess we are in currently. I've been saying in the last couple of weeks that, like, you know, I don't know what everyone's faith basis is, but if you ever wanted to know if God was a woman, I think the coronavirus has answered that question unequivocally. Because in my personal cosmology, God is a tired Black mama who is sick of us tearing up her house, leaving her doors open, wasting her food, being mean to our siblings, and she has promptly told us to get in this damn house and sit our ass down. Each of us, right, been sent to our collective rooms to think about what we did and how we have contributed to the disharmony of our shared home. And that I believe there's a way in which we're supposed to do that, not from a place of guilt or shame, because ultimately, I really do believe just guilt and shame are just so often just, you know, like this way to actually avoid accountability. It's like, oh, I just feel so bad that now I don't have to do anything except feel bad, right? And instead, accountability and honoring where we are actually moves us beyond inaction. And so we've been summoned to collective reflection and accountability. And we have questions that we got to ask ourselves. Like I said about that brunch, what is the real cost of my convenience, right? What do I get that's been easy? My Amazon Primes, my one-day delivery from something that has clearly come from the other side of the world. Who suffers for my ease? Whose life have I never considered, and how has that lack of consideration created harm? And I think that when we really ask ourselves these questions, step by step throughout our days, as we make decisions about the next thing that we're going to do, all of a sudden, we start to see what of our old existence needs to be left in the fire. And again, not just individually, but collectively. What have we worshiped that has brought us to this particular brink of global calamity? And what in this moment do we get to call forth from ourselves, and have we called forth from ourselves, that collectively moves us toward a richer, more vibrant version of our own individual selves and our collective self? What have my higher angels directed me toward in this season? And outside of our fear, the truth is that we're like generous and we're expansive and we're loving and we're kind and we donate and make masks and we drop off groceries and we tend to children and we sing songs and make videos of support and we have car parades for people's birthdays and to honor them, and we reach beyond our own needs and we consider the needs of others. We humble ourselves and we seek guidance from those who we know more than we do. And in these moments of calamity, we are made small in our not knowing, but we don't have to see this as a failure, right? That actually we allow ourselves to be led by those who have seen what we cannot see. And it's that process that is the process of co-creation. It's the dance of giving and receiving, of being both the bearer of knowledge and the earnest student, and not ever making any hierarchies in these roles. I think the last thing that I want to say before I sort of open it up for some questions or to talk more is that in order to be in this, to stitch this new garment, my deep belief is always that that garment has to be made out of love. And that so much of the issue is that we really have flattened the word love. We have taken all the fang and fire and action that actually lives in the word love out of it. And I think that once we return love to the fullness of its power, we can actually see how it can work for us in moments like this. And the other thing is that I actually think love is the easy part. Love is the easy part because love is actually what is already there. It already exists in us. It is already the foundation of our humanity. It's changing the light. I'm sorry. My head is doing things. The sun is moving as we're having this talk. And so it's switching. It's changing how I can be seen in this moment. I'm sorry about that. Love, like I said, is the easy part because it's the origin of who we are. It's how we arrived on this planet. I say this in the book. It is the most authentic manifestation of our relationship with one another. It's actually the only true thing. It is what was here before the fire, and it's what will remain when the embers cool. And so the work isn't about trying to figure out how to build love. Like, it's not like, oh, how do we build more love? That would be like saying, how do we build an ocean? Or how do we build birds? How do we build a tree? And the only time we ever have to ask those questions is when we've gotten in the way of the natural ability for those things to create themselves. We don't actually have to ever do that. But we have certainly, as humans, tried to figure out how to manufacture it. And the manufacturing is because we have interrupted what is naturally already there. And so the work is not to figure out how to build love. The work is how to let go of everything that impedes love. The work is to release all of the illusions that are not love. And it is in the forging and in the co-creation process that we're given the opportunity to surrender those things that are not love to the flames of this moment. And when we stop running in and trying to rescue the things that don't matter, trying to rescue the non-essential, our comparisons, our notions of enough and worthy, our belief in individualism, how we're posturing or posing or clamoring for a definition of ourselves shaped outside of ourselves, that's all the stuff that is asking to be burned away. Because when that is burned away, what's left is love. And making love normal demands that we stop holding on to these old identities and activities and ways of being that are illusions, and allow the flames to consume them. And I don't want to say this, I feel like it's so important. I feel like I said this in every talk I've ever given for the last 8 years, is I'm not saying it's easy. People are like, you just make that sound so easy, Sonya. I'm not saying. It's terrifying. It's utterly terrifying. It's gonna be scary, y'all. It is. And I want to share just a moment of my own sort of scariness in the last few weeks. So, like I said, I'm in this experience that feels like a soul awakening. I've been calling it a spiritual initiation in this 8 weeks here in my home alone. And it's one where, for me, source guidance, whatever it is that knows beyond what my little mind knows, whatever that is, it's been giving me real specific instructions, very, very, very specific instructions. And one of those instructions was to wake up in the middle of the night. And I didn't set an alarm, I just was awakened every night around 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was directed to get in my car and drive to the ocean at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I wasn't directed to drive. Like, now I live 15 minutes from a lovely, sweet little beach. It's so quiet, it's so pleasant, it's beautiful, called Maraitai. Nope, I wasn't directed to go to Maraitai at 3 o'clock, which would be lovely. No, I was directed to drive at 3 a.m. from my home to Piha Beach, which is an hour and 30 minutes from my house through, it's a black sand beach that you have to drive through all of these like snaking sackcloth roads and the Waitakere ranges. And then you get to Piha and it's pitch black. And it's a black sand beach perched between 2 giant black rocks they call Lion's Rock. And it's the Tasman Ocean. And I don't know if you know anything about the Tasman Sea. It is the most violent, aggressive, intense sea that there is. And then I was directed to walk out to the water's edge and gather water in a pitcher. In the middle of the night, at 3 o'clock in the morning, in front of the like Tasman Sea. And of course, at 3 a.m., it's low tide. So the ocean, to get to the water, is way, way, way far out. So it's almost like you feel like you're walking on water in the pitch blackness. Now, I don't know if any of you all have ever stood beneath a blanket of the entire galaxy, wandering toward a calamitous ocean in the middle of the night when you are told to get close enough to touch it. I don't know if you've had that experience, but I want you to know it's terrifying. It's one of the scariest things of my entire life. I described it as feeling like staring in the face of God, whatever that might look like. But I did it. And I did it because I'm in the practice right now of surrendering in a way that I've never been asked to surrender in all of my life. But what I got was, after the terror burned off, I was left with these breathtaking and stunning majesty of all that was actually created, of a world created in love. And I was able to discern the difference between fear and danger. I wasn't actually in danger. New Zealand doesn't even have any predators. Nothing was gonna eat me. It's bunnies and possums out here. And what I got offered was the distinction between this gift and all of my illusions. All of my illusions that were making me feel like I was in tremendous danger, right? And what was left was this miraculous love, this love that something has so much for me that it wanted me to experience the entire galaxy and the entire ocean and the entire beach, all to myself in the middle of the night. And this is what we get to have if we choose at the precipice of this moment to let the fires rage and leave the illusion to cool to ash. What feels important to say before I stop saying is that it won't be enough to just let love, right? Like love is there, it's going to be awesome because love is there now. But we have to tend to it. Like anything else, we have to decide that we're going to grow it. And if we don't tend to it and grow it, then all the weeds that were there before will return. All the old things that whose roots are really, 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 really deep. So even if we burnt off everything at the top, it's looking for an opportunity to come back, unless we choose to actively tend to what is new, to be in action around our love, and to create a circumstance that holds to accountability all of those things that are not love. And I think that's where we are right now, you know, and it will be imperfect, and it will be messy, and it will be confusing, and it'll be hard, right? And we get to be graceful with our ideals, as my friend Keisha says. But it is in that choice to tend, to be to the tending of this new and precious love, that we actually have the opportunity to create a new normal. One that I believe absolutely can work for each and every one of us. One that I believe, that I'm excited to co-create and dream and go through the fire with each and every one of you to get to. Because I know on the other side, we're going to come out closer to our dreams. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks for letting me share. I so appreciate it.
Wow. What such powerful presence and presentation you just gifted us, and just the amazing kind of transparency that you have about all of it. You know, the going back to normal and wanting to stay paying $22 for your brioche breakfast. And we don't have a lot of time, Josh. Is there at least one question, maybe? I don't know. So we're just going to go ahead and see if there's like a burning question. But for me, like one of the things that I relate to so much in terms of my thinking around how to move forward is that, you know, I think about, so my family in Puerto Rico, all of my family's in Puerto Rico, and they've gone from, you know, hurricanes to earthquakes to, you know, a government that is so corrupt that they can't even feed the kids lunches, to now the pandemic. And for me, it's about, the love is there. Like, you know, when the earthquakes were happening in the southern part of the island, everybody from the north went there and brought whatever was needed. And, you know, there's this whole aspect in the movement there around kind of providing what people are needing, but also kind of doing a lot of kind of awakening kind of dialogue around, you know, what is it that people need to begin to kind of ask themselves and reflect around. But it's difficult when you're coming out of so many disasters, literally shock after shock after shock. How do we then continue to move forward? You know, and like you said, it's going to be hard. We're in the fire, you know, we're forging. But how do we give people hope, I guess, is my piece, you know, and knowing that love is existing and that we're in this kind of tension around, you know, if we don't go back to like producing for the capitalists, how do we survive in the meantime?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think, you know, I think that what lives in this question of like, you know, like how do we give people hope, is the truth is that there's hope all around us, that it's the only reason we're still here under the circumstances of the existence that we have lived, that marginalized people have lived in on this planet, right? Like I keep saying this because it just keeps coming to me every single time, is Lucille Clifton's poem, it's Untitled, but they call it Celebrate. But the last line of it says, "Won't you celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed?" And that it is that fact that somehow we still here, despite earthquakes and floods and hurricanes and Donald Trump and chattel slavery and everything else, that somehow we are still here, means that we are supposed to be here. Means that we obviously inside of us have that which we need to move us forward. And so the hope for me is, again, about learning, how do I listen to that voice that has sustained all of my ancestors, that has sustained all of these generations, that has sustained all the ways in which the world has tried to kill me and has failed. That's the hope. And it's all around us. It's in the babies that are still playing, who play like Corona who? Earthquake what? Right? There's that level of resiliency, that innate ability to continue to go on is the hope. And I think it's when we stop seeing that we start feeling hopeless. And so when we start feeling hopeless, it's time to redirect our vision towards that which is thriving despite all the other stuff, that which somehow still continues to go on. And I think it's one of the reasons why nature is so important. It's one of the reasons why, I'm told to go to the ocean at 3 o'clock in the morning, because guess what? It don't care. Somebody used to say to me, my friend used to say, and the sun is not concerned. And it did not mean it in such a way like the sun don't care. It's that it's going to shine. It's going to shine whether you're having a hard day or you having a good day. And so redirecting our vision towards that which is an inexhaustible light, I believe, is how we keep having some hope. Yeah. And the poem is by Lucille Clifton, Untitled, Celebrate. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So our time is up, and I really want to stay open to invite you again to kind of further this conversation and move forward.
I'd love to.
Just people's questions. And, for me, the next step is like the how-tos, like in Cuba, they say la alfabetización, or the alphabetization of learning. Like we need to start from A to Z to really begin to kind of put into play, what action are we going to continue to move forward? Like there's a lot of great stuff that's happening all over the world. I know that here in the Bay Area, there's like a lot of efforts, even though Trump continues to want to just keep squashing everybody down, there's more of us than there are of them. That's the thing that in Puerto Rico they kept saying when they got the governor out. There's more of us than there are of them, and we got to remember that. So thank you so much for your generous gift to us. I so love seeing you and appreciate your presence and your gift. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for inviting me. I'm deeply honored. I appreciate it. Yeah.
And I think Joshua's going to say a couple of things, and then we were going to close you off with a poem.
Yeah, we're going to close with the poem. Sonya shared so much, you all. This will be available as a video recording. And also coming up this Tuesday in the US, I believe, and Wednesday in New Zealand, Sonya's going to be on the Good Ancestor podcast. We'll send out a follow-up with the link so you all can find it. But in the chat, go to Sonya's website, sonyareneetaylor.com. Check her full story out, buy her books. Yeah, let's share this wisdom. This again is part of a series called Medicine for These Times, and this coming Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, we are blessed to be joined by Akaya Windwood, another bright guiding light, and we're going to be exploring the topic of it's time, the world we've been reaching for is arriving, and I think it'll just be, carrying on with this spirit of what is coming through us together. So please join us for that as well. And again, Sonya, yeah, such a deep bow for your life and your work and your walk.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. Saida asked for this poem, which I haven't done in quite a long time. So I'm going to close this out with this poem. It's called Bodies of Resistance.
Thank you.
It is Monday afternoon, and Roberta watches her sons spout laughter from their geyser throats. Sun-choked and full of joy when she brings them to the beach, all 6 family members are here, a sanctuary slightly out of reach, a raft against the lash of constant waves, but the undertow will be too savage for her to save them. Today, the ocean is a tyrant appointed to swallow them all, until 80 Samaritans build their version of a wall in the Gulf of Mexico, single-mindedly summoned to ferry Roberta's drowning family back to shore. Humans who intuitively know that every wall needs at least one door. Today, 80 disparate strangers became bodies of resistance. Today, 80 people rebelled against an apathetic ocean's insistence on a sacrifice. And this is life, y'all, in these bodies. Breathless and beleaguered, we coax one another to survive. We are alive despite even our bones' dissent. The slack-jawed mutter that says these bodies were not meant for delight. Who are we to smile when the world spins in entropy, a hula hoop at our feet? What right have we to meet this day with anything but fear? We are safe right now, but out there wells the tiny bloom of child we hush from the inside. And I know she is, he is, they are, you are afraid, convinced we must beware and hide. But what are we if not survival personified? Because at this very shake of seconds, a queer kid is unapologetically lucent in the lion's den of a middle school cafeteria. Just as a woman takes a seat in the precinct, steeling herself to report the rape, defiant against the red tape, inclined to indict her skirt's failing reach, only to acquit the menace of toxic masculinity. While a fabulously fat woman on a plane explains to the man who spent 4 hours dissecting her body in a series of tweets that she has no intentions on vacating her seat of dignity to make room for his hate. A trans woman clutches the doorknob of a woman's bathroom at the exact second a politician attempts to legislate her into invisibility. A college student with cerebral palsy and 7,000 signatures petitions for accessibility in the office of a college dean. Some days, the invocation of simply being seen in the body you have today is the chant, is the march, is the picket sign. There is no time in all of history when these bodies have not resisted. Even as they tried to gavel our silence, nevertheless, we persisted, each of us, a link in the human chain. Your shame has not slain even the lowliest of beasts, but our collective transformation has defeated entire empires, ushered us intrepid to capital city streets, 3 million grains of sand forged under the heat of oppression until we were fine as keen-edged glass, a buttress of bodies unafraid to ask why Black lives should not matter. As we saw no they in we, knew solidarity was a word that must spring like water, forever beside a standing rock. The clock of justice will not tarry while you question whether or not you are worthy of the fight. Forget all you've been told. Resistance is an everyday act. It's the work of excavating each tiny artifact of the oppressor that lives in you. It is the call to be a balm to every self-inflicted wound, is how movements are birthed. In a world content to bid you endless slumber, waking unrepentant in your own skin is a hero's journey, and the only way we collectively prevail. And only then can we celebrate, in the words of the great poet Lucille Clifton, that every day something has tried to kill us and has failed and will fail. Ashe, thank you all so much for having me.
Wepa, gracias.
They say love is the answer, they say love is the way.
Thank you, friends.
It's in the world, I hope I see you again someday. In isolation, trying to find the right words to say. To the rest of the world, from Oakland to the rest of the world, I love you. I love